Hello everybody, it's Mr. McKeeper here, and today we're going to talk about the Russian Revolution. Now, if you remember from the last time we talked in class, Russia never makes it out of World War One. It is a struggle that proves a little bit too much for the really quite weak Russian government, and this is going to be the end of Tsarist Russia as we kind of know it, and really ever. And this is really just a culmination of a series of events that's been going on for a long time now. The Russo-Japanese War around the turn of the century really was the starting point of this, gradual progression towards civil unrest and, eventual destruction of the government. Because the people are constantly struggling to try to find a place in the new world. The Russo-Japanese War made it very apparent to the Russian people that they had fallen behind again. And in doing so, their attempt to really quite quickly industrialize the nation is going to make life awful for the people, and it's going to lead to tons of protests. And unfortunately for Russia, Nicholas was not the leader who could really get them through that time period. And with the Russian World War I participation being as awful as it is, it's really just going to be a final straw that breaks the camel's back in Russia. So, what actually happens in the Civil War? Well, or the Russian Revolution? Well, this is going to be a few different steps here. The Russian Revolution itself is going to not take place until really this World War I just becomes a catastrophic disaster for everyone involved. Nicholas himself is never really trained to be a truly effective leader in the form of autocracy that would have been needed to pull this off. He is at best a reluctant ruler. Never really truly wanted to embrace the power that was kind of handed to him by his father, Alexander. So when World War I breaks out and Russia's allegiances tie them to Serbia and bring them in, Russia jumps in despite the fact they really had no right to be in that conversation, to be in that conflict. They were not at the same economic or political or military level of a Germany, Britain, or even a France at that point. And this additional stress to an already weaker government is going to end up being their downfall. And the, final fun piece, the final ingredient to really stir things up to make it crazy is going to be this guy named Grigory Rasputin. He is oftentimes known as the Mad Monk. Look at those eyes. Those eyes are truly quite hideous. And the story of Rasputin himself is also quite hideous. Rasputin himself is actually a converted, really alcoholic. He had a family, a wife, and a bunch of kids. And according to the legend, he sees a vision of Mary, and this converts him, or at least inspires him, to renew his faith in a very small sect of Orthodox Christianity. And what's unique about this is that it's a belief system that believes that you get closer to God by committing as much sin as humanly possible. And it is through repentance, or repentance to God for all the things that you do, that actually brings you closer to heaven and makes you more of a holy man. Well, for Rasputin, this means that he is going to be arguably the most nefarious and notorious adulterer in Russian history. And I know that might be a little terrifying based on the look of this man, but apparently those eyes are the game-changing tool of happiness for him. And he walks into an amazing situation. The situation is that Nicholas's only son, Alexei, is born with a blood disorder known as hemophilia. Hemophilia is actually a pretty rare disorder. It is something that's passed down genetically and is oftentimes largely a product of genetic inbreeding between families. And this is a common occurrence between royal families in Europe. Because they were so adamant on maintaining royal bloodlines, they didn't provide enough genetic diversity to prevent this from ever really breaking out, and it became a mass problem for many royal families. And as Alexei is sick because of this disease that prevents him from ever being able to clot if he gets injured, or at least Nicholas's wife, Alexandra, is going to look to any opportunity she can to help her son. And she begins to hear these stories of this man, Rasputin, who supposedly has healing powers and has these psychic abilities to do extraordinary things. And while this seems absolutely ridiculous at the time, these are not just like one or two people saying this. This is a pretty well-known rumor that is going throughout Moscow and throughout Russia at this point. He is becoming quickly known as a man who doesn't play by the same rules, or really the rules don't necessarily apply to him because he is unique and special. Well, In an attempt to help her son, Alexandra is going to invite Rasputin to the royal palace. And this is going to open up the door for Rasputin to have more and more influence, particularly when Nicholas will be charged to go to the front, an idea that is given to him by Rasputin. And when he does, Rasputin starts taking more and more control into Russia. The control of the nation itself is actually given to poor little Alexei, but he's a small child, so it really goes to the mother Alexandra. Well, Alexandra becomes a little smitten with Mr. Rasputin, and rumors of affairs break out between the two of them. And this is going to lead to massive unrest within Russia. The royal family is terrified at the notion of Rasputin having total control. And as he has more and more control, as he starts putting his own friends into power, things in Russia start getting progressively worse very, very quickly. The economy begins to fall apart in the country, and the people who are kind of behind the scenes, typically in charge of Russia, people in charge of the royal family, realize that if the royal family is to survive, Rasputin must go. And a plot is crafted to get rid of Grigory Rasputin. One of the most interesting and yet frightening stories in all of world history. Rasputin is lured to a house to dinner with members of the royal family. And at this dinner, the members of the royal family plot to kill Rasputin. And they hope to do it originally through poisoning him. So they poison his drinks and his food, and this does not kill Rasputin. He continues on, and he just chats with them for hours after having consumed frightening amounts of poison. Panicking at this point, they withdraw to a different room where they decide that they must kill him in a more direct manner, so they come back and they shoot Rasputin in the face. So they walk away, trying to decide how to dispose of the body, and Rasputin still isn't dead. They walk back into the room, he's gone. He has walked out the front door and is walking away from the house. In panic, the members of the royal family run up and stab and shoot him, and then decide that this will be the end. They tie his feet to a large boulder and toss it into the river. His body washes up a few days later, and he is finally dead, but he dies of exposure to cold temperatures and drowning. Not from the gunshots, not from the stabbings, not from the beatings, not from the poison that he drank or the poison he ate. And it really just adds credence to the rumors of what was with Grigory Rasputin. And the final piece to his legend is one that's really quite extraordinary. Weeks prior to Rasputin's death, he was afraid, or at least concerned, that members of the royal family would try to kill him. So he makes a declaration saying that if any member of the Romanov family, the Romanov dynasty, has anything to do with his death, within 1 year from the day, all members of the dynasty will be dead. A prophecy that will shockingly come true, as eventually all members of the royal family are lined up in front of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg and executed within 1 year to the day of the death of Rasputin. If you're intrigued about Rasputin more, there's another video link that is on the Moodle page and that I've attached in this email that you should watch. It's really, really interesting. Alright, so this is actually a picture of Rasputin's body. It's a little graphic, but you can see the gunshot wound directly in his head. But the idea that he actually drowned in the Neva River as his actual death is a little frightening. But that is the story of the Mad Monk. With the death of Rasputin, the government officially collapses, and this is going to be our round one of the actual revolutions. It is called the March Revolution, and it's going to be a little bit different than your normal revolution because it doesn't actually have any leadership to it. This is going to be something that is going to be explicitly led by masses of people who are just fed up with a government that is failing. And it will create an institution known as the Provisional Government to replace the Tsarist rule. But the Tsar's family is still alive. Nicholas has returned home. Alexandra, Alexei, their small daughter Anastasia, and the rest of the family is well and safe, but they're no longer in charge of Russia. That is going to be led to a man named Alexander Kerensky. And Alexander Kerensky is actually a wonderful candidate for this. He's a career politician and well versed in the problems that Russia is facing. And is probably the best case scenario as to actually fix the problems in Russia and return stability. But he makes one fatal error. And that one fatal error is that he believes that Russia must maintain its commitment to World War I. And he only gets one mistake, because that one mistake was such a doozy. And this is actually going to push Kerensky out of control. So Russia is going to break into a second revolution, and this is the one that is more iconically known in history. This is the Bolshevik Revolution. the one that will be led by Vladimir Lenin. Lenin's going to play the major role from here on out in the birth of a new country in Russia. Kerensky's government is viewed as a failure because of its inability to get out of World War I. Lenin sees this as a wonderful opportunity. He is actually going to seize control of the government and a civil war will break out. And it breaks out actually at the moment where Lenin believes the first step must be to rid Russia of its czarist past, so he has the royal family executed. Again, within a year of Rasputin's death. When this happens, the civil war breaks out between two groups, the whites and the reds, the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks. The Mensheviks are a group that would like Russia to stay as it is right now with the provisional government, so one revolution was enough for them. What they did not want was communism, which is what the Bolsheviks espoused, which was what Lenin looked for. He thought this was the perfect opportunity for the workers of Russia to finally unite together and institute communism in the world. It would serve as an example to the rest of the nations of the world who are still embroiled in this World War I travesty to revolt against their governments and espouse communism. And it works, due to the effect and due to the impact of a man named Leon Trotsky. Lenin is an extraordinarily charismatic person. He can mobilize people together, but he cannot lead them in military conflict. He was never talented in that way. His friend Leon Trotsky, though, is. Trotsky's a brilliant tactician, and he will lead the Bolsheviks to a masterful victory over the Mensheviks. Unfortunately, though, it will lead to the death of another 8 million Russian people, tacked on to the millions of Russians dead in World War I, which now it amounts to about 5 million, plus another 5 million who are injured, leading us to a total casualty rate of almost 20 million people in the course of about 4 years. When this happens, Lenin's first official course of business is to get Russia out. They will draw up a treaty with Germany called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. When they do so, Russia is officially removed from World War I. To do this, they effectively have to give up all claims to any aspect of Eastern Europe they control. And this will include all of Poland, Finland, the Baltic states, and Ukraine. That is an extraordinary amount of territory lost, particularly the Ukraine, which served as the breadbasket for Russia. But Lenin is willing to do anything at this point. His sole priority is to reestablish power in Russia and its communist government. His mindset is that Russia needs to be reformed and rebuilt. And in doing so, he is going to remove the shackles of old Russia and bring birth to his new modern Soviet Union. With that, folks, we are finished. You guys have a wonderful night, and I will talk to you later. Have a great day.